I'm Sherry Bagley. I'm the executive director of the Association for Experiential Education. Today we have this very important webinar that is being put on by Curt Davidson and Gudeman, and they are part of our new Adventure Education Working Group. AEE has traditionally had professional groups, and Curt and Brack are working on creating reinvigorating the adventure education working group. So this is kind of a start to that. They have this great information. They're going to talk a little bit more about what all that means at the end of this presentation. But we are excited to have people join that group and be part of it. Again, the professional groups in AE are kind of niche areas where people that are in the same type of profession can get together, have webinars, conversations, pre-conferences, that type of thing that focuses on their work within that big experiential education umbrella. So awesome. Curt, Brack, I'm going to let you take it away.
Right. Cool.
Go to the nature playground.
Let's see. All right. Well, thanks for being here, everybody. We got a little slideshow. Can you all see that on your screens, hopefully? Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks, Sherry, and want to say thanks to the AE for having us. Appreciate you all taking the time. Nice to see people. It's weird to see people in the summer. I feel like I don't normally see anybody in the summer. But yeah, here to talk today about some wildfire air quality index and just some types of decision making stuff that goes into thinking about these types of issues. So yeah, thanks for spending some time with us today. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Brock.
Wonderful. Thanks, Curt. Good to see everyone. We wanted to start this presentation, or I wanted to start by kind of telling a story about sort of why I'm here today. In 2018, I started being the program director at UC Santa Cruz outdoor program on the Central Coast. And part of that program was inheriting a wilderness orientation program in the Sierra Nevada, where we'd have 60 students at a time go out to different parts of the Sierra Nevada, and they'd go on 11-day backpacking trips. And in 2018 and 2019, the groups would be out there, there would be smoke. We get calls from parents that I'd have to field. And there was no real guidelines about what the decision was about whether we pulled a group or not. Well, the wind's going to change, things should be fine. I kind of stumble through trying to make a decision. And then in 2020, in August, the CZU fire happened on the Central Coast. And even though COVID was happening, that fire burned 80,000 acres and almost burned down the campus here. And while that was happening, another fire in Big Sur, the Dolan fire, burned 100,000 acres. And I was just watching a majority of our course area just go up in flames. And in early September, I went to the Sierra to kind of go scout out some course areas because the Sierra is still good. And while I was out there, I watched the creek fire start. And the creek fire exploded to close to 80,000 acres in 4 days. And had it not been for COVID, we would have lost 5 vans to that fire, and 3 different groups would have had to have hiked up and over the crest of the Sierra to completely different areas. And it sort of reshaped my perspective, oh, this is something that's real. This is something that is affecting us. And I need to start thinking of some ways and gathering some tools to make better decisions to prepare my staff and the program, and to start having conversations about what is our risk tolerance for sending 80 students at a time out into the Sierra in September. And is that a risk that we want to take on anymore? And since then, as we started to have these conversations and started to change our programming, we have seen every single year there has been a group that has been either affected or would have been affected by either smoke or an additional wildfire in the Sierra. And so just on a personal level, just watching this sort of transition of what used to be a really reliable course area for us just isn't reliable anymore. And it's forced us to start making some changes about what we should and shouldn't be doing in that time. And so with that for today, what we are kind of hoping to cover with you all is just talking a little bit of the overview of the problem that we're kind of all experiencing. I know right now throughout the West and up in Minnesota and in North Carolina. Colorado Outward Bound base right now is evacuated. There are all of these fires that are impacting people in their course areas. And so talking briefly about the overview of the problem, and then giving some tools for programmers of decision making and ways that they can maybe think about what their course areas might look like for their season, giving some tools for field staff, and then some ideas of developing some staff trainings for them. And so, oh yeah, HMI as well. Yeah, it's happening everywhere. So I'll pass over to you, Curt.
Cool. Thanks, Brock. Yeah, so just a little bit about the scope of the problem. And like Brock's saying, part of the reason we got interested in this is that it is impacting places where it otherwise would not have been an issue. I mean, my parents, I was talking to them the other day, they're in Louisville, Kentucky, and they're in their 70s and just now for the first time ever are seeing wildfire smoke in that area. And so yeah, it's affecting programs around the country in really different ways that where folks are just, completely unused to dealing with these types of things. So yeah, a little bit about the statistics here. I won't bore you too much with the statistics, but huge amounts of areas burning. We now average about the size of the state of Maryland every summer. We're burning wildfire smoke. Wildfires starting in shoulder seasons when they're normally were considered, safe and free from wildfire issues. And then, yeah, if you want to think about it, yeah, roughly the size of, we're adding roughly about the size of the island of Puerto Rico. So yeah. So what are some of the root causes? And this probably a lot of you are probably familiar with a lot of these, but just in case, in a word, climate change is contributing greatly to this. Things like bark beetle, drought, and then also previous fire suppression strategies led to increase in fuels in the forests around where the Forest Service used to have this out by dawn type policy where, send in teams, smoke jumpers, whatever it took to get the fire out within like 24 hours was the window, was kind of the strategy. And that led to these huge amassing of fuels in different forests around the country. And then also, yeah, aging infrastructure and yeah, lack of resources in general, people. The Forest Service budget now reflects fire suppression, fire management is like, I think around 80% of the Forest Service budget now. So that's money that's not going to recreation and different infrastructure, different things like that. So yeah, it's becoming a pretty significant problem across the board. And so for us as people that work in the outdoor space, we think about fire probably is on your radar, given what's happening out there. But there's also this cascading sense of the problem from wildfires. And so fire and smoke are sort of the two immediate things. And that's one of the reasons we wanted to do this webinar now is because as fire season ramps up, those are these immediate types of issues that are probably on your radar. But what a lot of people falls off the radar is these things like air quality, visibility, and then post-fire hazards like operating in burned areas and operating in fire scars, which can introduce their own types of problems in the backcountry, or if your base camp area or ropes course area experiences a fire, you might see some of these other types of hazards years after a fire. Yeah, I worked for Northwest Outward Bound a fair bit in the Cascade areas where we had to hike an extra one night of one course. We had to hike an extra hour or two to get out of a fire scar area because it was super windy and we were worried about widowmakers falling on students in the middle of in the night. So yeah, so with that, hopefully framed up the problem a little bit. I'll turn it back over to you, Brock, to talk a little bit about the tools for the toolbox they might be using now and into the future. So, yeah.
Thanks, Curt. And I'll preface this by saying these are just tools that I have found super helpful as I start planning out my summer season and really year round, at least on the Central California coast. we're experiencing wildfires year round. 2 years ago in January, I had a leader call me who is down in Big Sur, and there was a fire in January that completely just like changed the course area. And so the tools of the toolbox for us is, yeah, giving you all some tools to help you make informed decisions months out, and then kind of leading up to your course areas that can help maybe inform certain decisions. So we're going to walk through a couple of what some of those tools are. You can go to the next slide here, Curt. And so I've been starting to break out like as you plan for like your season within like the fire season, breaking things out like months out, weeks out, and then like your daily stuff, and how does fire play into that. And so big picture months out, we're going to go through some tools that I at least am studying kind of on a weekly basis to sort of see how it is impacting the course areas that we operate in, monitoring drought, monitoring soil moisture, and starting to think months out, do we need alternative course areas? And based on some of these things, and what does that look like? And months out, am I operating with other land agencies that we work with, trying to operate and get new permits or new CUAs to have some options and available backups if it just feels like we're going towards a big potential fire year. The wind in the country blows predominantly west to east and from south to north. And so for us, it's thinking about finding course areas that are a little bit more south that aren't as impacted by wildfires. So those are like things that I'm like thinking about like in January as we're like working into the summer season. And so one of the tools that I find really helpful is the Noah River Forecast Center. Each sort of like basin is operated and looks a little bit different, but it has a lot of the same information. And this website for me is the most helpful when it comes to like monitoring moisture content and snowpack. And so, Curt, if you go to the next slide. So for the California, Nevada area, this is sort of what the layout looks like. Again, they're all a little bit different, but from there, you can look at the snowpack and observe precipitation for all these different pinpoints throughout your states. And you can compare what the snow water equivalent is to a normal year to versus what it is right now, and track that over different water years, over different types of years. You can monitor the snow depth change just on a daily basis or a monthly basis, but also you can compare it to historical averages. There's always different archives that are daily and monthly. And so on a weekly to monthly basis, as storms are rolling through the winter, I'm comparing our course areas and what the relative like moisture content is in the snow that we're getting to what is like the normal years. And it can be really helpful for me to start getting a picture and like an understanding about like what is summer going to look like based on what we're getting right now in January and February. And so these are some of the questions that I ask myself. What is snowpack or observed precip now? What should it be? How does it compare to other years? And how could it impact my trip planning? And then how am I continuing to monitor that throughout the winter? Here there's a bunch of different buttons. It's like kind of old school NOAA, heaven forbid they like make it look modern. But you can, down here at the bottom of that slide, you can see the monthly water year archive. And so you can compare what is happening this year to different water years. Another tool that I'm constantly monitoring is the U.S. Drought Monitor. It's amazing by not only just showing you where droughts are, but also being able to measure things like the soil moisture or like vegetation health. So a lot of what makes these big wildfires so dangerous is that the moisture content in the fuels or in the trees is just lower. And this website, you can kind of track what that looks like for your area. So not only is it like, is a snowpack low, but like, what does it look like when it comes to, the different types of vegetation in your area? And is it holding the moisture or is it not? And all of these things are, again, just giving you a window into like your course areas and what maybe the upcoming season is going to look like. Great. So then a month to a week out before a course, I'm continuing to monitor these sites, and I've started to just like
Mm.
book permits for places that might be different or that fall differently into these categories and other things. For us, we operate all over the state, and I will start like, okay, like Big Sur has gotten a ton of precip this winter, and the moisture content is high, and it feels like a more reliable course area than maybe the Southern Sierra, where they only got 60% of average for their normal precip. And so those types of things I like to know as I'm starting to plan trips, as I'm starting to book different permits for different things, and knowing that I also have some backups if there are fires that are going to be starting. So I'm thinking a lot about what the likelihood is. The other thing that I'm looking at is this awesome site, the Sentinel Hub Playground, which is almost real-time satellite imagery that can monitor the snowpack. And so this is something that throughout the summer season, I'm tracking of like how fast is the snow melting? What does it look like in my course area? And it is essentially taking real-time photos of the entire world almost every 7 days. And so you can really get a tracking of like how quickly are things melting, how fast is my course areas like opening up, or how dry are they based on monitoring through the Sentinel Hub Playground. It's amazing preseason. It's amazing during your season. It's great for personal trips also, if that's something that you're into. You can totally get lost on the site of being able to like, yeah, monitor the different, the snowpack in your area. So here's just an example of May 31st through June 20th and getting to track, yeah, what that snowpack looks like.
All right. So, yeah, Brock hit on those tools that are really helpful for preseason and things leading up to maybe when your busy season is. So we want to switch gears a little bit and talk more about more in situ tools that are helpful for looking at where fires are in your area, how smoke might affect your programming, and how to find useful information. So I'm gonna try to switch my screen. Let's see if this works. Yeah, cool. So if you're in the West, you probably have seen Watch Duty. But I feel like it went from pretty basic website to really rich in features. So just wanted to do a quick like run through in case you're somewhere where you're not overly familiar with the wildfire tools, but this has kind of become a one-stop shop for monitoring fire stuff right now. I look at this pretty much every day. I live in Moab, Utah, and we've had a fire southwest of us for a while now. So I'm looking at this all the time just to see, can I even walk my dog outside today? So yeah, it kind of looks like this. Here's an overview of active fires that are going on, and you can zoom in to your location. Let's look at this fire, the Willow Fire here. So yeah, I can cruise in close to the Willow Fire. The Willow Fire is the one affecting the Colorado outbound base at the moment. And so, yeah, it gives me just a ton of information straight off the map. So these zones are active evacuation orders. So level 3 is these areas are evacuated. These yellow areas are level 2. So it's like have your stuff ready to go and packed. And so, yeah, you can cruise in, see which they try to put the icon near the point of origin of the fire so you can kind of get a general sense of which direction the fire's heading. This one's been heading largely east, as is typical. And you can cruise in even further and see, yeah, kind of like at a real micro level. These are super, pretty accurate. And then if you click onto the fire name, like I just did, brings up the Willow Fire, tells me acres, containment, and different level. And this is where I was talking about it being kind of a one-stop shop. So this is will have information from INCIWeb. It'll have information directly from the firefighters, sheriff's office, whoever's managing that particular incident. even like shelters that are open, you can go to like these in Buena Vista, and then information lines. So if you do have like a group in that field, you would definitely want to contact the people managing that particular incident and let them know you have students in that area, or whatever the case may be. Really good information, all straight from this one place, Firewatch or Watch Duty, sorry. And then the second tool while I'm on my browser here is that I would highly recommend monitoring is this fire.airnow.gov. And this is the attempt from our government to consolidate the air quality information. And this tool has gotten really good over the last couple of years. So these data points are all individual air quality monitors. Let's zoom in again. The only thing that's kind of weird is they don't overlay the map. There's probably a way to do that somehow. But yeah, I think this is Denver. So you can see that air quality in the region, which is really helpful. So if you have choices about trailheads to use or places to go, you might use this as kind of like a regional focus. And then if you come in here, this is sort of a newer feature as well. So not only can you click on these individual data points, and see yellow brick building, you can see the air quality over time with these, which is really helpful. You can also go into, let's click a yellow one here and expand this. You can see air quality index, the trend, which is helpful. You can see, yeah, all these different things, and fires to the west. It'll give you and the information about, okay, the Willow fire is what's causing this smoke. And then you can switch back to watch duty, see what's happening with that fire, maybe check containment levels, what's going on in that moment. So you can get a ton of information, start to think about, how's this going to affect my programming area, students that I might have out there, different things like that. And then these blue zones are also smoke forecasts. So if you just click in the blue, it'll bring up the smoke outlook. This is for South Central Colorado. It was forecasted on the 15th. It'll bring up a new window here and talk to you about the fire that's affecting that zone. So again, Willow Fire. It'll tell you about the smoke, what is burning exactly, type of fuel. Obviously, we're talking about wildfires here, and talk about some of the forecasting. So you can switch the major impacts, major areas that are being impacted here, and look at, okay, this afternoon it's supposed to be unhealthy for sensitive groups, and then switching back to moderate later in the evening. And then, yeah, again, if you're unfamiliar with the air quality scale, we're going to talk more about this later, but good, moderate, unhealthy for sensitive groups, unhealthy, very unhealthy. So, and then, yeah, tons of information, recent observations, all these different things and additional resources. So, yeah, hopefully that's helpful for monitoring air quality. Air quality. So myself and Dr. Zwart from University of Tennessee are working on air quality and recreation a fair bit, as are some other folks doing some really interesting research. And what we're finding is that it's particularly more toxic than we thought. And so, you think about wood smoke when wildfires burn. Or breathing that, you might guess, is unhealthy. But what the we're learning as they analyze the smoke is the toxins in the smoke are far worse than just like wood smoke. So there's often heavy metals because these fires have that extra fuel and are burning at hotter temperatures. They're burning topsoil where heavy metals get sequestered. And so in wildfire smoke, there's been things observed like alkali, lithium, all types of stuff that gets embedded into that wildfire smoke. And so having a really good plan around not just fires, but managing wildfire smoke is sort of what we are hoping that you take away from this presentation. The air quality index is really, if you're unfamiliar, really familiarizing yourself with this is really helpful. So we want you to think about not only exposure to wildfire smoke, but also the length of exposure. So how long have your students been out there? How long have your staff been out there breathing that smoke? And yeah, thinking about at what levels they've been breathing it in. One of the things that we find helpful is this tool. We're happy to pass on these images. There was a really good Forest Service report about smoke. And so this is kind of what we're looking at. If you see this, top left is 0 to 50, so just a good air quality day. And there, top right is, or sorry, bottom left is starting to get some more wildfire smoke. Top right is when it gets into unhealthy for sensitive groups, and then bottom right is unhealthy. So might be what your staff is seeing in the field. And despite having all these really great tools that we just showed you, Watch Duty and Air Now, they might be observing other issues out there because there aren't monitoring stations out in the remote wilderness areas. And so, yeah, having some sense of what these air quality indices look like is really helpful for both you and your staff. I think Brock is going to talk to you about using this in his staff training so that staff can recognize, like, oh, we used to be able to see that mountain over there, and we woke up this morning and now we can't see it. Okay, we need to start thinking about air quality. So, going back to our research that's happening, what we've found is people are really not good at checking the air quality index. Like, I know I am very guilty of not checking it before I go for a bike ride or anything like that, and just not really on my radar. And so, yeah, it becoming a more cultural norm for us, like, when you get up and you check the weather using a weather app, even that reports the air quality index in the same screen as the temperature and precip chance, maybe, is a really good step in the right direction. And then, altering your plans accordingly. So, yeah, present this as a tool, and we're happy to share any of these resources too. Yeah, Brock, do you have something to add there?
This is something that we use on all of our staff trainings, is this diagram for staff to be able to sort of get a gauge about what the AQI looks like while they're out in the field. And so being able to use these distances of like on the map, like, well, can you map out 6 miles and see how far that is? And I think what's been amazing for us is that it's been empowering for staff to have tools to kind of get a gauge of what it's like out there, while also having honest conversations of like, what you might be experiencing is, while is like true, is like there might be more information that we have back at base camp, that we also have a perspective of maybe what's going to change. And so while you might think it feels like 300, it might only actually be 125. But giving them some of these things to be able to like have some ideas about what the AQI might be can be really helpful, also to report back to base camp of what they're experiencing. I also wanted to share this thing. I didn't know that this even existed for the University of California until I started digging around. It wasn't something that was shared out to us, but encouraging people, especially at larger institutions. The UC system has its own decision-making matrix that essentially like makes the decision for you about what happens with AQI. I think it's a little bit blurry on this screen, and we're happy to share it out. But it essentially tells you exactly for like outdoor recreation or athletics or other outdoor things, like at what threshold are you modifying, like at what threshold are you completely canceling, and at what threshold are you thinking about on like sensitive groups and how you're modifying stuff as well. What we found is really complicated about this is, especially on courses where students are maybe out for 5 to 7 days, is that air quality can shift throughout the day. And we're not here to like recommend like this is the threshold for your program of when you need to cut it, or like this is the duration, but more having conversations with your team about what are those thresholds and what does that like look like to, yeah, when are you making that call, and what does that call look like? Is it as soon as it hits 200 you're evacuating a group from the field? is it a duration of like, well, if the AQI is at 200 for this amount of time, then they're gonna leave the field. And so making your own decision-making matrix about because AQI can be such a fluid thing, is having some sort of a matrix to help you make those decisions so that not every single one feels like a one-off as you encounter them. And so going on to, as Curt said, these daily routines for monitoring. During fire season, almost every day I'm on watch duty and fire.airnow.gov. One of the things about watch duty that's also amazing is it also shows controlled burns that are happening or forecasted where they're going to be burning. And so this is something that I'm communicating to my staff who are maybe out in the field constantly. I might send them an in-reach message of like, hey, there's a controlled burn 30 miles northwest of you. You might experience some smoke, but there's nothing to worry about. And so the more proactive that I can be to give my staff information also lowers their anxiety or allows them to maybe like, oh, just because we smell smoke doesn't mean that we're in like some sort of immediate danger. And so, yeah, pretty much every morning I'm checking my email and I'm checking watch duty and I'm checking fire.air.now. So we want to move a little bit to field staff trainings, which maybe for some of you are like, well, that was 2 months ago. And maybe we're a little, we missed the boat on that, and that's okay. And maybe it's something that maybe you want to pull people together, but we have sort of created a whole sort of like section of our staff training that's based around fire and fire response. And a lot of these kind of came out of these questions that me and my coworker were asking ourselves, like, how do we prepare our staff while they're out there? And how do I prepare them if they have to make their own decisions while they're out there? And like, what's our policy and what's our procedures for what that looks like? Because we were finding that, staff in 2018, a staff would call and be like, it's really smoky out here. And we'd be like, let me check. I'm not really sure. And then we're like, well, yeah, it is pretty smoky. It seems kind of bad, but report. And it just felt like very like we were kind of making it up, and no one really felt empowered or had the information to make good decisions. Okay, we can go to the next slide here, Curt. And so for all of our trainings, for all of our courses now, we kind of do a fire course consideration. And so for all of our courses, we look at their course route, where they're going, where they're camping, but we also give them an overview map that's way larger than where they're going. And we discuss all the alternative options for evacuations that are not where their vans are going to be parked. What do those look like? How do they get there? And for their daily routines, like their daily plans of where they're going to be going, they also are like writing out and have a good idea about where they could also evacuate that's not where they came from. And so we are doing that with every course beforehand. And we're also having conversations with them about these AQI guidelines, about how maybe they might need to modify their itinerary if the AQI does get a little bit higher, or if it gets around 150. How are we modifying, their itinerary, but not necessarily evacuating from the field? And so empowering field staff to have a good idea about how to make good decisions while they're out there has been super helpful for us. And so part of this training also is we talk with them about what happens if they see smoke or fire. Who are they calling? What does that process look like? And so for us, it's as soon as staff see or smell smoke, they contact the on-call person, which oftentimes is myself. And for me, it sort of depends. Oftentimes I'm going to go to watch duty. I'm going to look at the AQI. If there is a fire in the area, I'm also calling the land manager for wherever that fire is based. And I'm getting more information from them. I'm telling them where our groups are. And I'm also letting them asking for more information, because they often have even more information than what you're going to find on watch duty. And so they might be like, we have a bunch of hot shots coming in from this area, so your group should hike this way. Or they can give you information to help you make a good decision to communicate back to your group. So really knowing and building relationships with your land managers in your area is helpful for these situations, so that you can get more info to help best support your staff. And then for us, a big conversation has been like, how do we communicate with our staff, especially for things like a wildfire? Like, isn't inReach enough and is text enough? Should we be sending satellite phones with them? Or are they in a course area where they can get reliable cell phone coverage to communicate all this information? Another thing that we've been talking a lot about is creating shared language and culture with our field staff about what they're asking for while they're out there. And so we kind of go through a lot of these things like, I see a plume of smoke near this and need more information if it's growing or if we should consider evacuating. Or the smoke is really thick and it seems unhealthy. Can you give us an AQI check and an update on smoke? Empowering your staff to kind of ask for the information, but also giving them like shared language to be specific about what they're asking for to help them make good decisions has been really helpful for us. So that's already, that happened a lot last summer for us is we had a lot of groups that, were experiencing smoke out there and the fire was 40 miles away, but it was still impacting. And for them, it can be scary. You're out there, you wake up one morning and it's just really smoky and you don't know where that fire is. And we find that the more that if you're checking these sites, the more proactive that you can be so that when your staff wake up and maybe they turn the inReach on and there's already a text from the program manager or whoever's on call, letting them know, staff have really appreciated having that sort of information like readily available for them. And so we have created a whole, this is just like a very like shortened version of the response to wildfire and course that is in our like best practices book that staff carry in the field with them. And so the response to wildfire and course is contacting an on-call person, like I said before, gathering more info, determining the location and making a plan considering the terrain, the group, the weather conditions with input from that on-call person. And surveying exit routes. And I think every program again is just different in the way in which they do this. For us, a lot of our students or a lot of our instructors are college students. And so we try really hard to have a lot of that decision making, like they ask for help or provide information. It goes to the program supervisor who then gathers that information and helps them make the decision. You might have a program where your instructors have a little bit more autonomy over making those decisions on their own. I think those are conversations that you should be having with your field staff about like who is making decisions when and how are those decisions being made and what's the timeline for those decisions as you like work through the fire season and what that looks like. And so we also, again, if the fire is within an estimated blank miles away, the group will make plans to leave this area as soon as possible. Whatever that number is, I think kind of depends, and it depends a little bit on the tolerance of the tolerance of risk for your program. The creek fire for us, it expanded 20 to 50,000 acres a day. And I think it was like 20,000 acres. I can't remember it's like 26 miles. And so I think what we're starting to like experience in the last decade, especially, is these mega fires are moving so quickly and so rapidly that for a fire to be 30 or 40 miles away is actually pretty close, depending on how that fire is behaving. And so trying to figure out what that threshold looks like for you, I think is something to also talk with land managers about when that fire happens, about what the best course of action is for your group. And so if you go back real fast, Curt.
Oh, sorry.
It's all right. Part of our best practices is training our staff about like evaluating the relationship of the group to the angle of the terrain and where the fire is. So often these fires tend to burn uphill more quickly or burn away, like towards whichever the way the predominant wind is blowing. And so these are things that have helped us make decisions, but empowering our staff to give them a little bit of knowledge about like fire anatomy and how it works so that they can make the best decisions while they're out there. So these staff can evaluate the wind direction, the possible changes in the wind, and again, helping them make those decisions while they're out there, because you most likely will be able to get better information to help inform their decision making while they're out there. once you've like let a land agency know or you've decided that you want to evac or there is a fire that is coming, having talked to a lot of land agencies about like what is the best thing that a group should do while they're out there, sort of what we have heard is like having the group put on the brightest color clothing so they're easy to spot from the air can be really helpful if there's a wildfire that's nearby. And for your group to really make notes of like where lakes, ponds, large slabs of granite might be, open meadows, or large flat areas with little vegetation. These are things that we also like to do pre-course, is kind of talk through where some of those areas are. And it can be kind of a heavy conversation with your staff, but we found it to be pretty empowering for them to kind of have like an idea and a picture about where those spots are before they head out into these areas. And part of this training for our staff too is talking about what happens if they actually encounter a fire. And so looking for spot fires that are thrown usually miles ahead of the main blaze, avoiding ravines and saddles, and if hiking a ridge, dropping to the other side and moving down to large open areas. And then if for some reason your group is trapped, hiding behind anything that won't catch fire, and what we've been recommended to do is dig a hole for your face and keep your nose in the dirt if it gets really smoky. Yeah, it can be a heavy conversation to have with your staff, but I think that they really like having like knowing what to do if that were to happen. And so some other things that we're not going to go into, but that I think are worth asking for your organization is what's your evacuation plan if something happens to your base camp? Like what documents do you need to grab? Like, does your program have a grab bag and like what's in it during fire season? What's your vehicle plan? Like, where are all the instructor keys for all the vehicles that are on base? Is there plans to move them? Or are they just left behind? Do you already have a plan about where staff and students will go? Like, what's your relocation plan if you do have to evacuate your base? Like, is that already all written out? And then also, what is your communication plan? Like, how are you sharing that information with concerned staff, students, parents, and having all that stuff written out and a plan for it beforehand makes it a lot easier than while it's happening. For us, we have decided to not run big, large trips in the Sierra end of August and September. Like we are kind of like risk threshold of sending 80 students all over the Sierra in August and September for us, like isn't worth it. And we've completely changed our program so that they go out in June and they have to battle the bugs, but they're not there for like the predominant large part of fire season. And that's just one of the changes that we have made. Feeling a little bit like, yeah, it's sort of like rolling the dice. It feels like now that like, and it's amazing that we have not had more groups have more close calls with wildfires for the amount of students that are out in these areas in the summertime and during fire season. And so that's like for us, what the threshold has been of like how we've changed this sort of like program that's been going for 40 years and completely reimagine what that looks like to sort of mitigate these larger and newer risks that we're facing with wildfires.
Let's see. We're closing in on time, so maybe we'll skip this. But yeah. Oh, I don't know. What do you think, Brock? We got time?
It's up to you, buddy.
Let's skip it. All right. I think it's you again.
So we want to encourage you all, regardless of what your program is to hopefully move on from this with a little bit more like some tools to help you make some decisions, but also some action steps of having conversations in your organization about like who's in charge of monitoring, and how is that information being shared out throughout your organization? What is your sort of decision-making matrix when it comes to AQI? And how is your program deciding when an itinerary or a group is modifying what they're doing versus when are they leaving? And then also, yeah, developing protocols and staff training curriculum for your staff who are out there in the field, so that they feel empowered to make good decisions while they're out there.
Cool. So couple of things. One is I forgot to mention the masks. When I was talking about air quality. So one thing is we um wildfire particulate matter is really small, smaller than COVID. And so a buff, a homemade mask, even like a surgical mask don't work against wildfire smoke. They a surgical mask might help a little bit, but not it's not really useful. So one of the things you can think about, and we would certainly not say you should or shouldn't be doing this, but one of the things you could think about is sending everybody out with a proper N95 mask so that if there is a really significant evacuation situation, you can minimize their exposure to smoke that way. Obviously, if you're doing high strenuous activity, a mask presents other problems. And so, yeah, that's why I would never give any hard and fast guidance on that, but something you could think about. And also, yeah, so, just I think we think it's helpful for people to know, like, I see a lot of people hiking with buffs on and stuff, and it's just, yeah, it doesn't really help. So something to be aware of. And then with that, okay, so some other resources. Brock and I actually authored a free online course on this subject. If you were here today, you got most of the information. But it's like 5 modules. It takes probably, I don't know, hour and a half. It's on our website, alpengloweducation.com. Like I said, it's free if you want to have your staff do it. Yeah, it's just a lot of good information, a little bit more interactive, a little bit more in depth than what we covered here today, but pretty similar topics with that. And then, yeah, as we wrap this thing up, and we'll open it up for questions and comments and other things here in a second, but we wanted to make you all aware of something like Sherry mentioned at the beginning of the call that's happening is we're trying to revitalize this adventure education working group. So we realized a group of us at one of the AE conferences a couple years ago that there's not a great place to talk about non-risk management issues in our field. And we think it's great that there's like wilderness risk management conference and all those things, but a place to come and talk about pedagogy and programming issues and climate change and all these different things. We don't really have a good space for that. And so the AE has been gracious enough to let us see if people are interested in these topics, coming together and talking about all the other stuff that we're dealing with in this field, and particularly a look towards the future of how we make our industry more resilient to some of these threats, like climate change, like wildfires, but also just like how do we stay relevant in the age of AI and all these different things, and try to come together and talk about best practices. And so if you're interested in having those bigger conversations about the field and the industry, highly encourage you to reach out. We're going to do a 1 day pre-con at the Estes Park at the International Conference this year. You can scan the QR code and register. I think it's like $10 to come a day early. We're going to hang out together up in Estes Park. We're going to have these conversations, figure out what this working group might look like going forward. And yeah, this is kind of like the ground floor of this thing. So if you want to get in on something that's potentially has the ability to impact the industry for years to come, that's what we're hoping this could be. So yeah, if you're coming to the conference anyway, come a day early. It's going to be a good time. And yeah, with that, love to open it up to more questions. I know there's people on this call with more information. I'm looking at you, Steve and Amy, and yeah, all the folks that are out there. So if you have things to add, this is a space that's not getting a ton of traction right now. So yeah, I'd love to have a conversation, or if you have questions for Brock and I, we can do our best. So yeah, thanks for being here again. Yeah, I can post the link in the chat here.
Curt and Breck, I know we've had a couple of people ask for your slideshow. Are you all good with sending that out? I can make sure that happens and everybody gets it.
Yeah, for sure.
This was awesome. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate all the guidance and all those websites and the monitoring resources and just the work that you put into this. So thanks so much for that. Gates dropped it into the chat, but just to highlight, Shauna Tartar was recently on our podcast, and she did such a great job of kind of getting up into the stratosphere, not in the field response, but more in the organizational, like strategic planning, long-term outlook. And some of
Mm.
those things, Brock, you were mentioning, no longer running programs in August in the Sierras. To me, that's not a field decision. That's more like an organizational strategic planning. It has budget implications. It has far-reaching implications. And Shauna did such a nice job of sort of exploring, and not just fire, but she was talking about climate change in general, of which fire is one topic. And I would really encourage us as an industry to do this thorough job that you folks just demonstrated with the field side, but also to put an equal amount of energy into that organizational, strategic, long-term thinking side. And that's where, I feel like it's so easy for one year to become the next year to become the next year. And we're still doing the same things 5 years from now, that are no longer matching the dynamic changes that we're seeing with climate change, and fire is an illustration of that. So yeah, just wanted to highlight that link that Gates dropped into the chat here for us. And thanks again for this great leadership.
Cool. Yeah, thanks, Steve.
Can I ask a follow-up question just on the mask topic? Because we kind of went through this with COVID. I was under the impression, unless it got updated, that N95s aren't effective unless they're fitted properly, because we had to go through all the train the trainer and all the protocols that come with it. Is there a consideration around that when it's being offered voluntarily if they don't fit properly anyway?
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. So yeah, that is a good point. They have to be fitted properly. And there are better models out there. I'll post a link in the chat here in a second, but there are new designs in the M95 masks that are, I think, more foolproof to get them to fit properly. And again, yeah, it's not like a long-term solution, I don't think by any means, but yeah, there was some debate early on if they even worked at all, even N95 masks, because of the size of the particulate matter. But yeah, it's basically like a short-term band-aid before you find a better way to go, like getting the students out of the field or whatever. So yeah, good question. I'll post that link right now. I just bought some myself, so.
It sounds like it's more of a comfort item for somebody who would be personally concerned than a good tool to be using across the board, if I interpret that correctly.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they're moderately effective at keeping some of the particulate matter out. So again, yeah, I think the other thing to think about is the prolonged exposure. So if they are having to like sit out there and wait for an evac and it is smoky, trying to reduce that smoke. I mean, yeah, if you go down the research rabbit hole on air quality exposure, smoke exposure, the long-term benefits or impacts are really alarming. Like uh, people that grow up in places with prolonged exposure have like cognitive disabilities, are higher, heart disease. I mean, it impacts lots of different health issues. And so, yeah, it's definitely something to consider. Steve, it looks like you're going to chime in. Oh, okay. Sorry. I'm looking for that link right now. Sorry.
I had a quick question, and thank you, Curt and Brock, both of you, for that great information. And you touched on it briefly, but I was wondering how you have navigated permitting around these issues, because I know, having worked in several areas of the US, and Colorado in particular, permitting is really, really tight. So if you can't operate in your permitted area, it can be really hard to get permits for somewhere new. And just wondering how you've navigated that with the Forest Service or the BLM or whoever.
Great question, Amy. Thanks for asking. I've been pretty transparent with them about just the realities of like, well, if I'm not going to be using these user days in this area, is there the potential that we could use them here if there was a wildfire in this area? And often, I mean, for us, we work with lots of different outfitter or different land agencies, and so some of that has been getting completely new, like working with different land agencies all together for areas that are completely separate, which has opened the door up for like if we historically have gone to these course areas where our staff are familiar with them, what's it look like to train them to go to places that are completely different and new? And that's been for us a pretty big lift. But also having some pretty open and transparent conversations with these like forest managers because they're also dealing with it. And I think that I found a lot of like kind of shared understanding and common ground of they're trying to figure out like yeah how to like rebuild after this stuff or like what's happening to their campground. Like there's just so many things that are happening, and so we've actually had pretty good luck of some understandings of like hey, what's it look like for me to get permits for this area that's in the southern range of this district, but a week or 2 weeks out we can cancel those if this is looking good. And they've actually been pretty open to that being a possibility, especially with the separation, at least in California, of like commercial permits versus non-commercial. And we also have just been maybe our backup stuff is not going to be like cream of the crop, like the best areas to go to, but we can still operate there. And so those conversations have been really helpful with our land agencies.
Yeah, definitely a weakness, Achilles heel of the permitting system. Cool. Well, that's about an hour. Yeah, happy to stay on if people want, but probably got other things to do about your day. Thanks again for being here. Love to see you all at that working group pre-con or in other capacity. So yeah, hopefully see you around. Thanks again for being here.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Curt. Thanks, Brack. Really appreciate your time and putting this together for us.
Of course, Sherry. Thanks.